The security camera in the east corridor of Kensington Palace recorded everything that night. What it captured would end a 30-year career in less than 48 hours. James Holloway had been a royal guard for 12 years. He knew every hallway, every door, every face that belonged in the palace after dark. But on that cold November evening, he saw something that made his blood run cold. It was 9:47 p.m. Most of the staff had gone home. The palace felt empty, the way old buildings do when the lights dim and the crowds disappear. James was doing his routine patrol on the third floor when he heard voices. Raised voices. He slowed his steps. Listening, the sound came from the West Wing. From an office that should have been locked and empty, Sir Archibald Pemberton's office. The Director of Royal Communications. A man who had served 3 generations of royals. A man whose name carried weight in every corner of the British establishment. James moved closer. His hand instinctively went to his radio, but he didn't press the button, not yet. He needed to know what was happening first. Through the partially open door, he saw him. Prince William. In a gray sweater and dark trousers. No security detail. No assistant. Just him. And he wasn't alone. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button now. You won't believe where this goes. William's face was red. Not from anger exactly. From something heavier. Disappointment. Betrayal, maybe. In his hands were documents. Thick folders with red stamps across them. Confidential. Internal only. How long? William's voice was quiet but sharp as glass. How long have you been doing this? Sir Archibald stood behind his desk, pale, trembling slightly. He was 63 years old, distinguished, always composed. But now he looked small. Your Highness, I can explain. William stepped forward. His voice rose just a fraction. You leaked private family correspondence to the press. You sold stories about my children, about Catherine, about my grandmother before she passed. James felt his chest tighten. He shouldn't be hearing this. He knew he shouldn't. But his legs wouldn't move. Sir Archibald's hands gripped the edge of his desk. It wasn't meant to hurt anyone. I needed money. William threw the folders onto the desk. Papers scattered. Some fell to the floor. You needed money? You, with your pension, your properties, your title? Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Then William did something James had never seen in 12 years of service. He walked around the desk, opened the drawers, started removing things. Files, USB drives, a laptop, personal items, a framed photo, a crystal award. What are you doing? Sir Archibald's voice cracked. William didn't answer. He just kept clearing, methodically, calmly, like he was packing away a life that no longer had permission to exist within these walls. James pressed himself against the corridor wall. His heart pounded. Should he leave? Should he stay? Should he report this? Then William spoke again. Quieter now. More dangerous. You're done. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out within the hour. You won't return. Not for your things. Not to say goodbye. Not ever. Sir Archibald's face went white. William, please, it's your Highness to you now. William's eyes were cold. And if you speak to the media, if you write a book, if you even mention this family in public, I will make sure every institution you belong to knows exactly what you've done. Do you understand me? The older man nodded. Broken William walked to the door, arms full of the items he'd removed. That's when he saw James. Their eyes met. For 3 long seconds, neither man moved. Then William spoke. His voice was different now, tired. Guard Holloway. You saw nothing here tonight? Is that clear? James swallowed hard. Yes, Your Highness. But they both knew the truth. James had seen everything. And that was about to become a very serious problem. James didn't sleep that night. He sat in his small flat in Hammersmith, staring at the wall, replaying every word. Every image from that corridor. By morning, his phone rang. It was his supervisor, Chief Security Officer, Martin Davies. Holloway. My office. 7 a.m. sharp. The line went dead before James could respond. He arrived at 6:52 a.m. The palace felt different in daylight. Normal, like nothing had happened. Staff walked the halls with coffee cups and folders. Gardeners trimmed hedges outside. A tour group was already gathering near the gates. But James knew. Something had shifted. Martin's office was on the ground floor, tucked behind the main security station. When James entered, 2 other men were already there. Men he didn't recognize. Suits, serious faces. One held a tablet. The other, a leather portfolio. "Sit down, James," Martin said. His tone was cold, professional, not the warm mentor who'd trained James years ago. James sat. His palms were sweating. The man with the tablet spoke first. "Guard Holloway. Last night at approximately 9:50 p.m., you were on patrol in the East Wing, correct?" "Yes, sir. You encountered His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, exiting Sir Archibald Pemberton's office. Is that correct?" James hesitated. Something felt wrong. These weren't normal security questions. Yes, I did." The man leaned forward. "Did you overhear any conversation between His Highness and Sir Pemberton?" There it was. The trap. If James said no, he'd be lying. The cameras had no audio, but William knew James had been there. William had seen his face. If James said yes, he'd be admitting to eavesdropping on a private royal matter. A serious breach of protocol. "I heard voices," James said carefully. "I didn't catch the details." The second man opened his portfolio. Inside was a printed document. He slid it across the desk. "This is a non-disclosure agreement. Standard procedure for sensitive incidents. You'll sign it, confirm you witnessed nothing of significance, and continue your duties as normal." James looked at the paper. Legal language filled the page. Words like perpetuity and criminal prosecution and breach of trust jumped out at him. His hand shook slightly as he picked up the pen. But before he could sign, Martin spoke. "James, before you do that, you should know. Sir Archibald was removed from the premises last night at 11:15 p.m. His employment has been terminated. His security clearance revoked. His access to all royal properties permanently banned."
Ow.
James looked up. "Permanently?" "Permanently," Martin confirmed. "And there's an active investigation into his conduct. If you know anything at all that could be relevant, now is the time to speak." The 2 men in suits watched him. Their eyes were sharp, hungry. James understood now. They wanted him to talk, to give them details, to confirm whatever they already suspected about what happened in that office. But then he remembered William's face. The exhaustion, the betrayal, the way his voice had cracked just slightly when he said, "You sold stories about my children." This wasn't about protocol. This was about family. About a man protecting the people he loved from someone who'd abused their trust. James set the pen down. "I saw His Highness leaving Sir Archibald's office. He was carrying some items. That's all I know. I didn't hear any conversation. I didn't witness any altercation. I was simply doing my rounds." The room went silent. The man with the tablet exchanged a glance with his partner. Something unspoken passed between them. "Very well," the man said slowly. "Sign the agreement." "You're dismissed," James signed. His signature looked shaky on the page. He stood to leave, but Martin caught his arm. "James." A word. Alone. The 2 men in suits gathered their things and left. The door clicked shut behind them. Martin walked to the window. He didn't look at James, just stared out at the gardens. "You're a good man. Holloway. Loyal. Discreet. I've always respected that about you." "Thank you, sir, but you've put yourself in a difficult position." Martin turned now. His face was grave. "You were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And now you're a witness to something that very powerful people want to keep buried." James felt cold. "I signed the agreement. I won't say anything. I know you won't." Martin's voice softened, saddened. "But that might not be enough." Before James could ask what that meant, Martin handed him an envelope, paid administrative leave. Effective immediately. 2 weeks. Stay home. Don't answer calls from journalists. Don't post on social media. Don't talk to anyone about what you saw or didn't see. James took the envelope. His hands were numb. Is this a suspension? It's a precaution. Martin opened the door. A clear dismissal. Go home, James. And be careful who you trust right now. James walked out of the palace in a daze. The morning sun felt too bright. The tourists at the gates were laughing, taking photos, completely unaware that inside these walls, someone's entire life had just been dismantled in a single night, and James couldn't shake the feeling that his might be next. 3 days passed. James barely left his flat. He watched the news obsessively, waiting for a story to break. A scandal, an arrest. Something about Sir Archibald Pemberton. Nothing came. It was like the man had simply vanished from existence. On the 4th morning, James went to the corner shop for milk and bread. The tabloids in the rack screamed their usual headlines: royal fashion, celebrity gossip, political drama, but nothing about Pemberton. He was paying for his groceries when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him press the green button. Hello? Silence. Just breathing on the other end. Then a voice. Shaky. Old. Familiar. Dard. Holloway. This is Archibald Pemberton. James froze in the middle of the shop. The cashier stared at him, waiting for him to take his change. You shouldn't be calling me, James whispered, walking quickly outside. I know I shouldn't, but I need you to understand something. Pemberton's voice was desperate, broken. I didn't do what they said I did. Not all of it. They're making me the scapegoat for something much bigger. James looked around the street, paranoid, like someone might be watching. Sir, I can't just listen. Please. Pemberton was crying now. James could hear it. I made mistakes. Yes. I spoke to journalists when I shouldn't have. I shared things that weren't mine to share. But I never sold stories about the children. Never. That was someone else. Someone's still inside those walls, and they're letting me take the fall for all of it. James's heart raced. Why are you telling me this? Because you were there. You saw his face? William's face. You know, he believed he was doing the right thing. But he was lied to. And now, I've lost everything. My career, my reputation, my pension, everything. And the real traitor is still there, still protected, still feeding information to the press. James didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to hang up, to delete the call log, to pretend this conversation never happened. But another part of him remembered the fear in Pemberton's eyes that night. The way he'd looked like a man watching his entire world collapse. What do you want from me? James asked quietly. Nothing. I needed someone to know the truth. You're a good man, Holloway. I've seen you work. You're honest. And I think you deserve to know you witnessed an injustice, not justice. The line went dead. James stood on the pavement, staring at his phone. His hands were shaking. That evening, a package arrived at his door. No return address. Just his name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. Guard Holloway. If anything happens to me, please make sure someone sees this. The truth matters, even when it's dangerous. AP James held the drive like it might explode. Every instinct screamed at him to throw it away, to burn it, to forget it existed. But instead, he plugged it into his laptop. The drive contained emails. Dozens of them. Between Sir Archibald and various journalists, some were harmless. Palace gossip. Public event details. But others made James's blood run cold. Messages from another email address. Not Pemberton's. Someone using an encrypted account. Sending detailed private information. Medical records. Travel schedules. Private conversations between William and Catherine. Photos of the children in private moments. And at the bottom of one email chain, a banking record. A wire transfer. £50,000. Sent to an account in the Cayman Islands. The sender's name was redacted, but the receiving account had a note attached. For services rendered. Continued cooperation expected. James felt sick. Pemberton was telling the truth. He'd been sloppy, indiscreet, but he wasn't the source of the worst leaks. Someone else was. Someone who was still inside the palace. Still trusted. Still protected, and they'd let Pemberton take the fall to cover their own tracks. James slammed the laptop shut. He paced his small living room, running his hands through his hair. What was he supposed to do with this information? He'd signed an NDA. He was on administrative leave. He had no authority. No connections. No way to verify if these documents were even real. But if they were real, if someone inside the palace was selling royal secrets and had framed an old man to protect themselves, his phone rang again. This time, a number he recognized. Martin Davies. James, we need to talk. In person tonight? Sir, I'm on leave. This isn't optional. There's a cafe on Fulham Road, the Blue Door, 9 p.m. Come alone. Don't bring your phone. Don't tell anyone. What's this about? Martin's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Sir Archibald Pemberton was found dead this afternoon, and you're the last person he called. The line went dead. James stood in his silent flat, the USB drive still sitting next to his laptop, and realized with horrible clarity that he'd just become part of something far more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. The walls felt like they were closing in. Outside, London carried on. Cars honked. People laughed. Life continued as normal. But for James Holloway, nothing would ever be normal again. He had 3 hours to decide what to do. 3 hours to choose between loyalty and truth. Between safety and justice. 3 hours to figure out if he was brave enough to do what was right or smart enough to walk away before it was too late. James arrived at the Blue Door at 8:47 p.m. Early. His training taught him to always scout a location. Before a meeting, the cafe was small, quiet. Only 3 other customers. An old man reading a newspaper, a young couple sharing dessert, a woman on her laptop near the window. Martin was already there. Back corner booth. 2 cups of coffee already on the table? He looked exhausted. Older than James remembered. James slid into the seat across from him, left his phone in his flat, like instructed. Thank you for coming, Martin said. His voice was flat, hollow. You said Pemberton is dead. Heart attack. This afternoon, alone in his Chelsea flat. Neighbors found him collapsed near his desk. Martin took a sip of coffee. His hand trembled slightly. Police are calling it natural causes. Stress, age, the shame of his dismissal. James felt the weight of the USB drive in his jacket pocket. He hadn't brought it, but he felt it anyway, like it was burning through his clothes. But you don't think it was natural, James said carefully. Martin looked up. His eyes were red, tired. I think Archibald Pemberton was 63 years old, healthy, no history of heart problems. And I think he died less than 12 hours after trying to tell someone the truth about what happened to him. The cafe suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Why are you telling me this? James whispered. Martin leaned forward. Because I've been doing this job for 28 years. I've seen things, covered things up, followed orders I didn't agree with, and I've learned one truth that nobody ever says out loud. Paused. The palace protects itself, not the people in it. The institution. And right now, you're a loose end. James felt cold. I signed the NDA. I haven't talked to anyone. I know. But you were there. You saw William remove Pemberton from his position. You're a witness to something that's supposed to stay buried. And now, Pemberton's dead after calling you. Martin's voice dropped even lower. They'll be watching you, listening, waiting to see if you become a problem. Who's they? The people who actually run things, not the royals. The machinery around them, the advisors, the lawyers, the fixers who make problems disappear. Martin finished his coffee. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be telling you this. But you deserve to know what you're dealing with. James's mind raced. Did Pemberton really leak those stories? About the children? Martin was quiet for a long moment. Then no, I don't think he did. I think he was careless. Talked too much. But the worst leaks, the truly damaging ones, those came from someone else. Someone who needed a scapegoat when William started investigating. Then why isn't anyone doing anything about it? Because the real source is too valuable. Too connected. Too dangerous to expose. Martin stood up. Dropped cash on the table for the coffee. Go home, James. Forget everything. Take your 2 weeks leave. Then come back, do your job, keep your head down, and live your life. That's the only way you survive this. And if I don't? Martin looked at him with something like pity. Then you end up like Pemberton. Another casualty of circumstances beyond your control. Another heart attack. Another car accident. Another suicide that nobody questions too closely. He walked toward the door, then stopped, turned back. One more thing. That call from Pemberton? The official record says it never happened. Your phone logs have been scrubbed. As far as anyone knows, you two never spoke. So if you try to tell anyone about it, you'll have no proof. And you'll look unstable, paranoid, unreliable. The bell above the cafe door chimed softly. James sat alone in the booth, his coffee untouched and growing cold. He thought about the USB drive hidden in his flat, the emails, the bank transfers, the evidence that could prove Pemberton's innocence and expose the real traitor. But he also thought about Pemberton's body, alone in his flat, dead at 63. His reputation destroyed. His life's work erased. Was the truth worth dying for? James left the cafe and walked through the dark London streets. Rain had started to fall. Light at first, then heavier. He didn't run, just let it soak through his jacket. When he got home, he went straight to his laptop. The USB drive was still there, waiting. He picked it up, held it in his palm. Such a small thing, such enormous consequences. Then he heard something. A sound in the hallway outside his flat. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. They stopped outside. Ouch. His door, James's heart hammered in his chest. He moved quietly to the window, looked down at the street below. A black car was parked across the road. Engine running. Windows tinted. No plates visible from this angle. The footsteps outside his door moved away. Down the hall. Back to the stairs, but the car stayed. James backed away from the window. His breath came fast and shallow. He was being watched. Martin was right. He was a loose end. And loose ends didn't survive long in a world where the truth was this dangerous. He looked at the USB drive again, then at his laptop. Then at the door, he had a choice to make. The most important choice of his life. He could destroy the drive. Forget everything. Go back to work in 2 weeks. Live a normal life. Pretend that night in the corridor never happened. Pretend Pemberton's death was just an unfortunate coincidence. Or he could do something with the information. Tell someone. A journalist. A lawyer. Someone who could investigate properly. But if he did that, he'd be painting a target on his back. He'd be next. Another convenient accident. Another problem solved. James sat on his couch in the dark, rain hammering against the window. The black car, still idling on the street below. And for the first time in his 12-year career, he wondered if protecting the crown was worth sacrificing everything he believed in. The answer didn't come easily. And when it finally did, it came with the weight of every consequence it would bring. James made his choice, and there was no going back. James didn't sleep. He sat in his dark living room until dawn, the USB drive in one hand, his phone in the other. By 6 a.m., he'd made copies. 3 of them, hidden in 3 different locations. One in his gym locker across town, one buried in a box in his sister's garage in Brighton. She didn't know what was in the sealed envelope. He'd told her it was important documents, Insurance papers, just in case. The third copy he mailed to himself. General delivery. A post office in Manchester. Far enough away that nobody would think to look there. Then he destroyed the original. Smashed it with a hammer. Flushed the pieces down the toilet. Watched them disappear. If they came for him now, they'd find nothing. But James knew that wouldn't be enough. They'd still consider him a threat. Still watch him. Still wait for him to make a mistake. He needed insurance. Real insurance. At 9 a.m., he went to a public library in Shepherd's Bush, used their computer, created a new email account with a fake name. Then he wrote a message. I have information about corruption within the royal household. Evidence of wrongful termination and possible criminal activity. If anything happens to me, this information will be released to multiple news outlets. Consider this a dead man's switch. I want no money, no publicity. I just want to live my life. Leave me alone, and this stays buried forever. He didn't send it to anyone, just saved it as a draft. Then he created a second email. This one he did send to an encrypted email service used by investigative journalists. No names, no details. Just documents related to Royal Leaks investigation available if needed. Will only release if threatened. Otherwise will remain silent. This is not a negotiation. He deleted his browsing history. Logged out. Walked home a different route than usual. The black car was gone from his street. For 3 days nothing happened. James stayed inside. Ordered food delivery. Didn't answer his door. Barely slept. On the 4th day, his phone rang. Martin Davies again. James, your leave is being extended. Another 2 weeks? Paid. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. The palace appreciates your discretion during this difficult time. That's it? James asked carefully. That's it. Come back in 2 weeks. Resume your duties. Everything goes back to normal. The line went dead. James sat down heavily on his couch. They were backing off. His message had worked. They knew he had copies. Knew he'd taken precautions. And they'd decided he wasn't worth the risk. He was being allowed to live. As long as he stayed quiet, 2 weeks later, James returned to Kensington Palace. His uniform felt different, heavier, like it carried the weight of everything he knew and could never say. Martin was waiting for him at the security station. Handed him his schedule, his access badge. Everything normal. Welcome back, Holloway. Glad to have you? Thank you, sir. They didn't mention Pemberton. Didn't mention that night in the corridor. It was like it had been erased from history. James fell back into his routine. Patrols, security checks, shift changes. The palace felt the same, but he felt different. Changed in a way he couldn't explain to anyone. 3 weeks after his return, something happened that made his blood freeze. He was walking through the West Wing. Early morning. Most staff hadn't arrived yet, and he saw a woman leaving Sir Archibald's old office. Except it wasn't Archibald's office anymore. A new nameplate hung on the door of Victoria Chen. Senior Communications. Advisor, she was in her 40s. Elegant, professional, carrying a leather bag and checking her phone. James had seen her before. Many times. She'd been at the palace for years. Part of the inner circle. Trusted. Connected. As she walked past him, she smiled. Good morning, Guard Holloway. Good morning, ma'am. She continued down the hall. Her heels clicked on the marble floor. Confident, unhurried. James watched her go. Something nagged at him. Memory. A detail he couldn't quite place. Then it hit him. The emails on the USB drive. The encrypted account that had sent the most damaging leaks. There'd been a detail in the metadata. A clue about the sender's identity. A timestamp. Messages sent at 4:47 a.m. Every single one. And James suddenly remembered something he'd seen months ago. Before any of this happened, Victoria Chen arriving at the palace at 5 a.m. He'd asked her why she was there so early. She'd laughed. Said she was a terrible sleeper. Did her best work in the early morning before anyone else arrived. 4:47 a.m. would be exactly when she'd be alone in her office. No witnesses. No security cameras in the private offices. Perfect timing for sending encrypted emails. James felt sick. Victoria Chen was the source. The real traitor, and she'd let Pemberton take the fall. Watched him be destroyed. Watched him die. And then moved into his office like nothing had happened. She was still here. Still trusted. Still feeding information to the press. And there was nothing James could do about it. If he spoke up, he'd have no proof. The USB drive was destroyed. The copies were hidden, but couldn't be verified as authentic. And he'd signed an NDA that would destroy him legally if he violated it. He was trapped. Forced to watch the guilty walk free while the innocent were buried and forgotten. That evening, James sat in the palace courtyard during his break. The sun was setting. Tourists gathered outside the gates, taking photos, laughing, living their normal lives. And James realized something that changed everything. This was his normal now. Living with the truth, but unable to speak it. Watching injustice and being powerless to stop it. Surviving by staying silent. He thought about Pemberton. Wondered if the old man had felt this same crushing weight before he died. This knowledge that the world wasn't fair. That the powerful protected their own. That justice was a luxury only some people could afford. James looked up at the palace windows. Somewhere inside, Victoria Chen was probably working late, planning her next leak, her next betrayal, confident that she'd never be caught. And somewhere else, Prince William was probably with his children, believing he'd done the right thing, believing he'd protected his family by removing a traitor. Neither of them knew the truth, and James could never tell them. He finished his coffee, threw the cup in the bin, adjusted his uniform. Then he went back inside to finish his shift, because that's what survivors do. They endure. They adapt. They carry their secrets like stones in their pockets, and they learn to live with the weight. 6 months passed. Winter turned to spring. The palace gardens bloomed. Life continued its relentless march forward. James Holloway performed his duties with quiet efficiency. He arrived on time, did his patrols, filed his reports. He was professional, reliable, invisible in all the right ways. But inside, he was different, changed. He saw things now that he'd never noticed before. The way certain staff members whispered in corners, the way some visitors were ushered through hidden doors, the way information flowed through the palace like water through cracks in stone. He saw Victoria Chen often. She'd been promoted. Deputy Director of Communications now. Her star was rising. She gave presentations to senior staff, appeared in official photos, was quoted in press releases about royal initiatives. She'd won. Completely. Absolutely. And the worst part was that she was good at her job. The palace ran smoothly. The royals' public image was carefully managed. Positive stories flowed to friendly journalists. Negative stories were contained or redirected. She was exactly what the institution needed. Ruthless, efficient, loyal to the crown if not to the people who wore it. James passed her in hallways. She always smiled, always said good morning. Never a hint of guilt or fear in her eyes. Maybe she didn't feel guilty. Maybe she'd convinced herself she was doing necessary work, protecting the institution, managing the narrative, sacrificing one man to save the whole machine, or maybe she just didn't care. One Tuesday in May, James was assigned a security detail for a private event, a small gathering in the staterooms, 30 guests, mostly charity directors and community leaders. Prince William and Catherine were hosting. James stood near the entrance, watching, listening, doing his job. William looked different than he had that night in the corridor. Lighter somehow. He laughed with guests. Catherine touched his arm affectionately. They seemed happy. At peace, he'd done what he thought was right. Removed someone he believed was hurting his family. Moved on. The burden lifted. James wondered what would happen if William knew the truth. If he knew the real traitor was still here, still trusted, still causing damage, would he believe it? Or would the institution protect Victoria the same way it had protected itself by sacrificing Pemberton? James would never know, because he would never tell. Near the end of the event, something unexpected happened. William was saying goodbye to guests near the door. Victoria Chen appeared at his elbow with a tablet, showing him something. A press release, maybe. A schedule. William nodded, smiled, thanked her. She walked away, satisfied, successful. And as she passed James, something slipped from her bag. A flash drive. It hit the floor with a tiny click. She didn't notice. Just kept walking. Her heels echoing down the marble hall, James stared at it. A small silver drive, lying on the floor like a gift from fate. He could pick it up, return it to her, do the right thing, or he could leave it there. Let someone else find it. Let whatever secrets it contained stay hidden. But there was a third option, one that made his heart race. He could take it, see what was on it, use it if he ever needed to. Real evidence. Not copies that could be dismissed. Not hearsay. Actual proof in her own hand. James looked around. No cameras in this specific corner. No staff nearby. Just him and the flash drive, and a choice that felt terrifyingly familiar. His training said leave it. His survival instinct said walk away, but something else. Something deeper. Something that remembered Pemberton's broken voice on the phone. That remembered the fear in his eyes. That remembered the truth matters, even when it's dangerous. James bent down, pretended to tie his shoe, palmed the flash drive, slipped it into his pocket. His hands were steady, his breathing calm. 12 years of training helped in moments like this. He finished his shift, went home, sat in his flat with the drive in his hand. This time, he didn't look at the contents, didn't copy it, didn't destroy it. He just locked it in a safe deposit box at a bank across town. Added a note, instructions. If anything happened to him, the box would go to a specific investigative journalist. One known for exposing corruption. One who couldn't be bought or intimidated. Then he went back to his life. His routine? His quiet survival? Years passed. James was promoted. Made senior guard. Trained new recruits. Told them about duty and honor and serving something bigger than themselves. He never mentioned Pemberton. Never mentioned that night in the corridor. Never mentioned Victoria Chen's flash drive sitting in a bank vault waiting. Victoria herself continued to rise. Eventually left the palace for a position in government. Then to a private security firm, always moving up. Always protected by the system she'd served so well. Prince William and Catherine raised their children. Performed their duties, carried the weight of the crown with grace and dignity, never knowing how close they'd come to a scandal that could have damaged everything. And James Holloway kept watch. Year after year, shift after shift, he never used the flash drive, never released its contents, never sought revenge or justice or vindication, because he'd learned something that cold, November night when he watched a prince dismantle a man's life in real time. Truth doesn't always win. Justice isn't always served. The guilty don't always pay, but witnesses matter. Even silent ones, even invisible ones standing in corridors, seeing what they're not supposed to see, because someday, somehow, the truth finds a way. Not always in the way we expect. Not always in the way we hope, but it finds a way. James retired at 55. 23 years of service. A modest pension. A small ceremony. A handshake from senior staff. Victoria Chen sent a card. Thank you for your years of dedicated service. He kept it. Put it in a box with his medals and commendations and photographs from better days. The flash drive stayed in its vault. Still waiting? Still holding its secrets. James moved to a cottage in Cornwall. Near the sea, where the air was clean, and the nights were quiet, and the weight of what he knew felt a little lighter. He never forgot Archibald Pemberton. Sometimes he'd raise a glass on the anniversary of his death. A private toast. A quiet acknowledgement. You deserved better, he'd say to the empty room. But at least someone remembers the truth, and maybe that was enough. Maybe bearing witness, even in silence, was its own form of justice. Maybe surviving to tell the story, even if only to yourself, was a kind of victory. Or maybe it was just what happens when ordinary people get caught in extraordinary circumstances and do the best they can with impossible choices. James never decided which it was. He just lived his life, kept his secrets, and watched the sun rise over the ocean every morning, grateful to be alive to see it. That was enough. It had to be.